God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Please be seated. Oh my gosh, I've got about 12 sermons in my head from these lessons. You are in luck that I'm at the end of my career, not at the beginning, because at the beginning of my career I would have preached all 12. I know better now, so I have to focus as much as I would like to leap into various and different parts of these scriptures. I want to focus on this 15th chapter of John. Now, we get a lot of that, and we get it in Lent and Holy Week, and then it comes back up during Easter, and it shows, and so we go back and forth, and so if you're thinking that the church lectionary is a coherent historical progression, let go of that. It's not. Because now we're back in the Last Supper. For those of you who might see this and weren't in worship, the gospel is from the 15th chapter of John, verses 1 through 8. And this may be one of my very most favorite chapters in all of the sections of scripture in all of the Bible. The 15th chapter of John. It's part of this great long peroration of a speech that Jesus gives at the Last Supper. I'm almost sure that he really didn't word for word give this speech, because everybody after the bread, the wine would have been asleep by the time he finished this sermon. They certainly had trouble staying awake in the garden after the sermon. So what we know, so let's set that aside and just think for a minute, though, of the juxtaposition between what we heard from the letter of John and this metaphor from Jesus in the Gospel of John. I would say the metaphor preaches a lot better because most people can get it, whereas 1 John is more didactic, as I said last week. We're continuing in sequence with 1 John on his essay on love. But the metaphor and the essay are saying the same things. They're saying the same things. So in the letter, John is teaching. In the gospel, Jesus is telling a story or is painting a picture. Now, the hard thing about the scriptures is that often we sit and nod our heads as if we understand the references when none of us grew up in an agrarian, pastoral, viniculture and sheep-based economy. But we've been preached to enough that we have a sense of it until I had this experience, and this is what I want to share out of, is I had the great privilege and honor of spending a week in a refugee camp with people who are part of the Episcopal Church of the Sudan. Nubian, the blackest of the black African people you could hope to meet. Beautiful, physically beautiful people. Substantial men that are way taller than me, beautiful women, beautiful clothing, and in many cases, quite well educated, but they live in a refugee camp because it's not safe in their ancestral lands. And I had the privilege of teaching a whole group of pastors, and I say privilege, actually I was terrified because I said, what do I, Mr. First World privileged white male with a master's degree, have to say to refugees who have fled war, famine, and disaster? What could I possibly say to them from my experience? And so what I tried to talk about, thinking about their context of war and tribal warfare and all this division of human beings that causes the crisis, division, greed, the desire for power, afflicts them all and makes their home unsafe. And yet here's Jesus holding up this image of being the true vine. And I was just waxing eloquent about the true vine right up till the minute I realized, of course, I'm waxing eloquent at about 13 words at a time because it's all being translated into Arabic. Hard to preach when you have to stop every 13 words, I tell you. That was a new experience. But I look out there and they're these are passionate lay pastors, deacons, lay catechists, which is how they evangelize in the African church, is they send in evangelists that convert people to Christ. They send in catechists, lay catechists, who teach them the faith. And I looked at those glazed eyes, and I mean, this is sub-Saharan Africa. It had to be 114 in the shade where we were. And I realized I needed to ask a question. I said, do you know how people grow grapes? And they all went, and I go, oh, we need to back up a step then, because they didn't get it at all. And maybe some of you don't quite know how that works, but in the ancient viticulture of grapes, they start with rootstock of wild grapes. Now they do that because the wild grapes have learned to survive without any human attention. They don't need us to make grapes. But they make little teeny, very sour grapes. Not that good for making, Manischewitz. You need a lot of sugar to get that sour grape into a sweet wine. So these guys are no dummies. Without any of the science, they figured out, let the rootstock grow up and let the big branches form, and we'll keep those intact. And then each season, or every other season, they come in and they literally graft onto those branches from sweet hybrids that make bigger grapes, sweeter grapes, more juicy grapes. Now, as is often the case with hybrids, they're weaker. They're more susceptible to disease, more susceptible to the bugs, the heat, and the cold, whereas the wild rootstock has learned to survive all of that. So you graft on the sweet grape branches, and then as they grow out, the natural trimming and pruning, those of you who are gardeners know what pruning does. What does pruning do? Why do you prune? To get rid of what? The dead. You want to get rid of dead branches that are just blocking the sunlight. And you want to stimulate growth. Now think about this. If this metaphor says that the ones he loves and are part of him, he prunes, think about what a pruning is. Now, cutting off dead branches means snapping it off. Here's the live part, here's the dead part, you snap it off right there, right? A lot of things. Pruning means cutting into the quick. You cut into the live part of the branch. Now, if we think of this metaphor in regards to ourselves, some of what God does is painful for us. Pruning is a painful experience because it cuts into the quick. Pruning, taking the metaphor and thinking about my life, pruning means what are all the things that are blocking the sunlight of the Spirit? What are the things in my life, the habits, the language, the this and that in fact obstruct my capacity to produce the most sweet fruit? So I want to get rid of the dead wood. And we all carry around some of that. Stuff from the past that serves no good purpose for us now. Maybe there was a lesson learned, but ruminating on it, feeling guilty about it, thinking it's still alive and doing something, it is wrong. It diverts us, diverts energy. Think about a plant producing fruit. The more energy that goes into the fruit, the better the fruit. The more energy that goes into other parts of the plant, the less there is for the fruit. So we try to get rid. Now the other thing is, what is the purpose of pain? Physical pain. Physical pain, one, tells you pull your finger out of the fire. You're damaging yourself. That's a valuable thing. Pain is, I'm not ever going to stump my toe on this table again. I'm putting a night light in the dining room. Pain is, but internally, pain is the stimulus that sets the body into a process of defense, protection, and regeneration. And at the simplest level, I scratch my knuckle doing something, it hurts for a minute. I bleed a couple of seconds to get the stuff out. And then this miraculous physical process starts where that little stripe of pain sets in motion a set of little chemical reactions that my skin repairs itself. Until it's all good, and I can't, I got a few scars, a few marks, but a lot of what I've done to myself on my own, there's no problem. My body completely healed itself. But it had to know it was hurt to do it. And so pain has a purpose. And it's not all bad, although we don't enjoy it. So if we think of pruning, is that anytime there's something that is blocking me from God, sometimes it's like, oh, that's blocking me from God. I'm just happy to get rid of that. Other times it is, I really want this, and I like it. I've enjoyed it for life. A lifetime of enjoyment of this thing that blocks me from God, and I'm not willing to give it up. It serves me somehow. Serves me, but blocks me from God. So pruning is going to hurt because I'm actually going to have to let go of something that I think I need, that I desire, that I want, that is necessary for my survival. But the pain, the snip, that cut, once it's done, once I and so we have some willpower, whereas the rose bush out there just gets cut whether it wants it or not, right? The grapevine gets cut whether it wants it or not. I get to choose. That makes it more difficult for the vine grower. The vines are out there saying, I don't think so much today. Take the snippers over on that part of the field. I'm not interested. Not interested in sunlight today. No, I don't want any rain. I just want to sit here and pout and dry up and be a raisin. See, these are spiritual truths in very common language. Jesus is such a genius. Such a genius. On the other hand, if I recognize my Christian life is not my own, it's not my every choice, it's not my power, it's not my life that we proclaim. We proclaim Jesus and Him crucified and raised from the dead. We proclaim something that is beyond capacity of belief. And yet, through the receipt of the Spirit, we also see in ourselves sweetness. We discover that we've let go of meanness. We've let go of ungodly rage. We've let go of judgment of our neighbor. We've let go of prejudices that culture would give to us. And we have begun to see everyone around us as a brother or a sister. Either one that's doing well or one that's totally screwing life up. Anybody ever had a big family? Can tell you they had all of those among the siblings. And they traded places. This one screwed up, then that one screwed up, then this one screwed up, and that one had a great victory, and this one had a great victory, and we celebrated that, then there's a tragedy. Life is all of those things, but if we're just trying to live it out of the power of our own selves, it can so defeat us and overwhelm us. And we become defensive and angry and judgmental, and we build walls to protect ourselves from a world that is so much more powerful than we are. So we can either live walled up, or we can be open. We can either be fruitful branches that have to suffer a little pain through our spiritual journey in order to get better and more fruitful, or we can just be dead wood. And as uncomfortable as it is, all through the Gospels, Jesus keeps throwing out this thing about people going into the fire. And I don't like that at all as a preacher. Now, lots do. They make all their hay out of that fire. But what I want to say, and I'll express my heresy again today, so that I express it both last night and today, is that I'm kind of an nihilist. Meaning that I don't really buy this idea that God needs a justice in which poor, limited creatures like us spend eternity in torturous hell for the mistakes we made in this life. But I do believe that free will demands that I be able to say no to God. If I can't say no to God, I'm an automaton. I'm artificial intelligence, not real intelligence. You see, we're moral agents. We have free will. We're not a grapevine. We can choose. We can move. We can say yes to the pruning. We can say, leave me alone. And I think somehow in God's justice and in this, for it to make sense, there has to be a moment where someone can just say no to God ultimately. And to say no to God ultimately is to separate oneself from the source of life. And therefore life is extinguished. Isn't that what fire does? Sticks don't burn forever, except for the burning bush, and even it's not burning forever. It just got Moses' attention and went out. Sticks burn up. The fire goes out. So I don't believe that this is about torture, but I do think it's about consequences. There is life joined to Jesus Christ. Whatever else God's doing out there with other religions, other cultures, other belief systems, other philosophies, that's God's business. But what I have been given, and what I believe is true regardless of any of the rest of it, is that being connected to Jesus is life. And it's a good life. And it's a right life. It's a compassionate life. It's a life that values healing over disease, unity over division, compromise over hard and fast positions. That's what love is for John. And it's only possible connected to Jesus to live that lovingly with one another. So we just keep practicing, okay? Till we get it right.